For a better experience, please use headphones. Hitchhiking to Hell. Today, we follow the story of a young couple, Jane and Stephen, on their last big road trip before planning to get married. Their bike breaks down in the middle of nowhere. Stranded and with no phone signal, they decide to start hitchhiking to continue their journey. But what seems like a harmless and exciting adventure quickly turns into a descent into a world of horror. A journey into darkness. I was so excited to take this trip with Jane, my fiancée. We had been planning it for months, and it was finally time to set off on our adventure. We packed our bags and hopped on our motorcycle, ready to take on the open road. We started our journey in Florida, traveling through the Panhandle and making our way up through Georgia, the Carolinas, and into Tennessee. We stopped to take in the beautiful scenery and even took a detour to visit Graceland, paying our respects to the king of rock and roll. But our trip took an unpleasant turn when our motorcycle broke down in a small county in the Midwest, deep in the heart of Amish country. We had no phone signal. We had no choice but to start hitchhiking to continue our journey. We were determined to reach our West Coast destination and make it to our final stop, the Golden Gate Bridge. At first, I was optimistic and excited about the new experience. We met some friendly people who offered us rides, and we even managed to make some new friends along the way. But as the days went on, I began to realize that not everyone on the road was as friendly as I had thought. We encountered some strange and unsettling individuals, each with their own dark past and twisted minds. Each ride we took brought us closer to our destination, but also we felt closer to danger. As the sun began to set, we found ourselves stranded on a deserted road with no cars in sight. Suddenly, a van pulled up, and the driver, a man with a haunted look in his eyes, offered us a ride. I hesitated for a moment, wary of the man and the situation, but ultimately we decided to take the ride and try our luck. He was an elderly man. He had an unkempt beard, weary eyes, and a gruff exterior. He was slow to speak, and his sparse words were filled with an unsettling aura. At first, Jane tried to make small talk, but the man was silent, offering only occasional mumbled answers. As we rode along, I noticed a particularly strange air about the man. His hands were rough, his voice tremulous and barely audible. He seemed to exude a palpable anxiety. He kept staring at us with a strange intensity, his eyes seemingly searching for something. Things became increasingly uncomfortable when the driver started asking us very intimate questions about our relationship. His line of questioning felt intrusive and odd, and when Jane rebuked him, he only smiled and continued. He asked us whether we had thought of having kids and where we wanted to be in 5 years. We soon stopped answering his questions, but that didn't stop him as he continued to comment on our relationship, offering darkly humorous suggestions as to our future. Soon, the questions turned even more intimate and inappropriate. Jane and I exchanged worried looks, and when the driver asked us about our sex lives, we had had enough. I asked him to pull over and let us out, and surprisingly, he complied. We quickly grabbed our things and scampered out of the van, grateful to be out of the disturbing atmosphere. We looked around and realized we were still quite far from our destination. With no other option, we set off walking in the darkness, eager to get to safety. We walked for hours in the dark until we reached the town of Wamsutter, Wyoming. We were both exhausted and thankful to have finally found a place to rest. We decided to rent a room at the local motel, the Sunset Inn. At first, we felt safe and relieved, but as soon as we entered our room, we noticed something was off. The curtains were drawn and heavy. The furniture was covered in dust, and The bed sheets were stained. We didn't know it yet, but danger lurked just outside our room. We both knew that there was something amiss, but we were too exhausted to do anything other than lock the door behind us and rest a bit. We were about to take a much-needed shower when we heard a sudden click outside our door. Instantly, fear struck us, and we both froze. We stood in silence for a few moments, trying to figure out what was happening. I grabbed a towel to wrap around myself and rushed to the door. I was relieved to find nothing, but when I turned the corner, I saw a figure outside our door, walking away. My heart raced as my body tensed with fear. We quickly realized that someone had broken in and locked the door from outside. We were trapped and vulnerable, and we had no way to get out. We tried to use the phone in the room to call for help, but no one answered. We were both incredibly scared. We had no idea what was going to happen or what the person outside wanted from us. After calming down, I realized that the figure walking away from our room was surprisingly familiar. I recognized it was the same mysterious driver who had offered us a ride earlier. I quickly informed Jane, and she immediately put the pieces together. We had been followed the entire time, and now the driver had his sights set on us. In this room, a sense of dread washed over me. The room was musty and damp, the sheets were stained, and the smell of mildew was overwhelming. I couldn't shake the feeling of being at risk. Jane and I tried to get some rest, but sleep eluded us. Every creak and groan of the old building seemed to be a sign of someone trying to take us away. We lay awake in bed, listening to the eerie silence of the night, our hearts pounding with fear. As the night wore on, our exhaustion and fear began to take its toll. We were both on edge, our nerves frayed. We knew that we had to leave this place as soon as possible, but we were trapped, stranded in this small, eerie town. I couldn't help but think about the driver and his twisted mind, his obsession with us. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, somewhere, watching us. The thought made my blood run cold. As Jane and I lay in bed, we suddenly felt our bodies start to move, but we were paralyzed, unable to move or speak. Panic set in as we realized that the driver had drugged us with some sort of sleeping gas. As we came to, we found ourselves bound and gagged, lying on the cold concrete floor. The driver and the staff of the Sunset Inn stood around us, their twisted grins revealing their true nature. They were all in on it. I could feel Jane's fear radiating off of her as she lay beside me. We were trapped and with no hope of escape. The driver's twisted obsession with death had led him to this, and we were the next victims in his sick game. They began to torment us. They filmed every moment, every scream and every tear. The hours passed in a blur of agony and despair until I thought I could take no more. After hours of torture, the kidnappers made us an impossible choice. They offered to spare one of us if the other agreed to take their place in their twisted snuff movies. With tears in her eyes, Jane selflessly offered to sacrifice herself to save me. I begged and pleaded with her not to do it, but she was determined to save me, even if it cost her everything. At that moment, I knew that I had lost her forever. My heart was broken, and I was consumed with rage and despair. As they led her away, I could feel the fear creeping in, threatening to swallow me whole. I was rescued by the police and taken to the hospital, but my mind was beyond repair. The trauma of that night had broken me, and I was consumed by guilt and grief. I couldn't shake the image of Jane's face as she was led away to her death. I was haunted by the sound of her screams. After my release from the hospital, the police searched for any trace of Jane, but found nothing. The Sunset Inn was abandoned and had been for years. It was as if the entire event had never occurred, as if Jane had never existed. I was admitted to a psychiatric hospital where I was diagnosed with severe PTSD and depression. The doctors did their best to help me, but my mind was too far gone. Here I am now, a shell of my former self, forever changed by that one terrible night, and I would never be the same again. This is the story of my journey, a story of love and hope they took away from me, my story of tragedy and despair. The end. I hope you enjoyed it. I want to remind you that this can happen to anyone, and it's important to always be careful when hitchhiking or traveling. In our next video, we will have a crazy stalker story, so make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an episode of our horror series, because you never know what kind of horror is waiting for you out there in the real world. Stay tuned, stay safe, and as always, be aware of your surroundings. We'll see you then.